So now let's focus on how these components are using these things. So a couple of things here. I've got my provider here. I've got my app. We'll take a look at the app component last here, but I've got my provider that's aware of my store. And I'm using React Redux to connect. So let's look at really one of the simpler ones here, although none of these components are very long. So I've got my presentational component and I'm connecting it here. I'm not really doing anything with my map state to props here, but when a user clicks on this button, I'm getting my attempt login, which is going to be my props, which are, again, map dispatch to props. This becomes a prop. So I can end up calling this with a username. And I'm using my dispatch, and I'm also using my history, which is my second parameter, because this is coming to me within a route. And I'm dispatching my thunk. I'm going to attempt the login. And so in and of itself, this is going to end up changing the Redux store. The Redux store, don't forget, when we end up attempting our login here, right, what it's going to end up doing is that it's going to attempt the login, it's going to set our store, and it's going to attempt to redirect to the main route, which we'll take a look at in a second. If we take a look at our home component, we'll see that our home component is passed the auth, because if you're logged in, and we only want to show this component if you're logged in, we're going to print out your name, and we're also going to give you the ability to log out here. And when we end up going to log out, we're going to end up logging out, and we'll end up dispatching. And again, here's our thunk with our actions log out. So again, this is going to end up interacting with the store by logging the user out. This is going to end up logging the user in, and this could have actually been a presentational component as well, but one would think at some point with the login component, you're going to want to have some state for your username and password, and we wouldn't end up, just hard coding these things. This is just for demonstration purposes. So we've got our login route, we've got our home route, and the only other one we have is our app itself. So here, what we're doing is that we're using our store to determine what routes the user ends up seeing. So if you're not logged in, there's no way that you'll end up even seeing the home component. We only show it if you're not logged in. We only show the login component, okay, if in fact you're not logged in. Now, where is this coming from? Well, here, we're basically just doing a little bit of massaging on our store and saying you're logged in, and we're just changing this value to be a Boolean. Not makes this a Boolean, so you're basically logged in if in fact you have an auth ID. And the other thing that we're also doing here is that we're going to attempt, and this also looks like it's a bit superfluous because I'm not using this here, but here what we're attempting to do, this might read a little bit easier, is that when we load this application, our app component is our main component, we're just going to go and give it a shot, see if you are logged in, and we'll make sure that we show you being logged in. These tend to be a little bit trickier. We're using, whenever our store ends up changing, we're just using the redirect here. So if you don't end up, matching these routes and you're not logged in, we're going to redirect you to login. If you are logged in, we'll end up redirecting you to our / component. And we're just sort of ensuring that you see something and you see what you're supposed to end up seeing. So here we've got the combination of our thunks interacting with our components. And here we see the ability to, when our component mounts, we're going to attempt to log in. So again, we're going to make a request to the server. We'll look at what those requests look like. But again, the reason why things are a little bit tricky is that you really have these, moving parts, and you just have to isolate them. I mean, in the end, nothing's going to end up changing unless your store ends up changing. So you have to look at your thunks and how those thunks are dispatching plain old actions to your store. Then you have to take a step up and see how those thunks, or if you're writing this, you're going to end up calling those thunks from parts of your UI, whether your login or whether your home page. And here, this just makes it easy to restrict what the user ends up seeing. So, for instance, if let's say a user was an administrator, you could also determine and say, hey, look, not only do you have to be authenticated, but you have to be an administrator. And this is not real security, but you don't want to end up showing the user the login component if, in fact, they're not logged in to the application. So, in other words, if I went over here and I log in, going over here and typing login, right, it's not going to make all that much of a difference because I never will end up seeing that component. And again, since I'm logged in, I'll be redirected to slash, which is going to end up being my home page. So that's really the, how the store is interacting with our components. And next we'll just take a quick look at the back end.